All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. And sorry, apologize for the late start, but we're here now, and we'll begin. Next up on the agenda is the Staff and Comm Committee, and then we'll go into the committee reports and action. Chairman Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to bring the Staff and Compensation Committee to order. We're going to, if you look on the agenda, we're going to turn things around a little bit. We're going to have a discussion first, followed by the consent items. I'd like to open the discussion, and in the process here, as we get started with the discussion, I'd like to invite Associate Commissioner Kevin McCrae to give us a brief summary of the status of the collective bargaining process.
Thank you, Chairman Robinson and members of the committee. The collective bargaining update is essentially an explanation of most of the items on the consent agenda. So hello, thank you. Get a little bit closer. Chairman Robinson, the collective bargaining update is essentially an explanation of the labor agreements and the staff items that are on the agenda. As we recall, at the May meeting of the Board of Regents, the Regents gave us important guidance as to your objectives and goals with regard to collective bargaining outcomes in the system. And the message that the Commissioner and the Commissioner's staff heard from that May discussion is that it is a high priority of the Regents to make meaningful improvements in compensation for faculty and staff who we know do a tremendous job of serving students and Montanans, and to also, in a mutual interest fashion, better equip the campuses to continue to be able to recruit and retain and hire and keep the excellent quality of faculty and staff that we have. So the result of a large share of our collective bargaining efforts consistent with that guidance from the Regents is before you on the consent agenda in the form of 20 labor agreements that we have entered into, tentative agreements, with 20 of the 25 bargaining units in the system. I do say 20 rather than 21 because item T on the labor agreement section, the Montana State University Northern faculty contract, we do not have a ratification yet there. We're very close to an agreement. We just have maybe one little road bump to smooth out. So when the motion is made to pass the consent agenda, if one is made and it goes in that fashion, we will need to remove item T in that motion. The outcome of the collective bargaining with those 20 labor representatives where we have tentative agreements does provide for a compensation adjustment that would be a 1% increase in salary plus $500 effective October 1st of this year, 2011, followed in the second year by a 2% increase plus $500 October 1st of 2012. Similarly, the staff items that you see before you for administrators on Board of Regents contracts and some personnel as well who are required to come before the board who aren't necessarily on Board of Regents contracts, largely provides for a similar raise as those contained in the collective bargaining agreements. I don't think in any cases any raises in excess of the raise that I just described. And if the Board of Regents approves this consent agenda for the 20 labor agreements and for the staff items, we would then also, unless you tell us differently, interpret your approval to mean then that the campuses are authorized to implement then the similar or the identical pay raise for any faculty and staff who are not covered by the collective bargaining agreements. So that's the update. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I do have a couple questions and wanted to start that process here first. But one is, I was curious about how this bargaining has compared to past years of where we've been.
Chairman Robinson, the good news is this is a relatively heavy agenda in terms of the number of bargaining agreements that are before you on this agenda. I believe 2 years ago, at the same point in the biennium, at the September meeting here, I don't think we had tentative agreements with 1/3 of our contracts yet. So we have 25 bargaining units total. I know 2 years ago at the November meeting, we had reached the halfway point. So in September today, to be voting on a consent agenda that has 20 of the 25 labor agreements, 80% of your contracts settled, covering 70% of the total employees who are represented by labor organizations, is a good, productive place to be.
What do you do with the rest of the
Good question, Regent Barrett.
And that's good news. I'm glad to hear that. We're all happy to hear that. And we certainly appreciate all of the efforts that you've made and the Commissioner's Office have made. I'm curious why you think that this has been as successful in getting that many bargaining units to the table at this particular time.
Chairman Robinson, there's probably a number of reasons. First, this proposed pay action that's contained in these 20 labor agreements is really historic, because probably in 40 years there has not been a system-wide initiative, system-wide being the key, where through collective bargaining you have been able to enter into agreements that are as substantially greater than the rest of Montana's state sector for employees in other branches of government or the other executive branch agencies. So to put it succinctly, you put some money on the table, and you have you've done so in a historic fashion because this is substantially above the norm in the rest of the state sector, and the labor partners who we negotiate with, I believe, saw value in that and appreciated that. So the fact that the Regents have put something meaningful out there is one factor that contributes to our productive bargaining this season. Also, I'm no longer the chief negotiator on all 25 contracts. About a year ago, the Board of Regents authorized the Commissioner to modify the duties of a vacant position in our office and hire a labor relations and human resource specialist to help out in Jackie Salveson, and she's done an amazing job pulling a load and negotiating contracts. So we've been able to keep up a bargaining schedule that's far more responsive to the needs of our labor partners' calendars than we ever have been before. I think between May and today, we've probably had 60 days of bargaining at the table, and that's never been able to keep up that kind of pace before. Lastly, and this is always a factor, but the help that we get from the people on the campuses who are part of the Regents bargaining teams is tremendous. We get HR director involvement, we get other people from admin and finance and academic affairs and so forth, and the people who join us at the bargaining table on your behalf really have a very good collaborative problem-solving approach, and there is a significant amount of really interest-based problem solving that takes place at the table.
Yes, Commissioner?
Regent Robinson, just to add to that, I will state that we have made good progress compared to where we often are at this point, and thank you for noting and commenting on that. That said, we still have some big challenges. One of the reasons also we're able to do as much as we do is because we do really have, frankly, very good, I think, alliances and common interests with the major bargaining units that we work with. They are huge friends of higher education naturally. We work together throughout the session toward pay plans. We develop collegial relationships. I think that helps a lot, and they're to be commended, and they are friends and colleagues. That said, also, though, we still have, as we almost always do at this point, some big challenges to remain. It seems as if every 2 years there are 2 or 3 bargaining units in which we just have special challenges. We have those again still. So I know you'll appreciate that we still have some hard work to do.
Major Robinson, thank you.
Regent McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. To echo at first some of the appreciation to our partners, if I could just begin by recognizing the folks who were on the bargaining teams on the campus who came to the table, meeting in and meeting out, and you, Kevin, and Jackie, for all of the time that you spent, our indebtedness and appreciation in that regard. To our folks at MEMFT, Marco and Tom, who are our partners as we advocated for the settling of these contracts, as well as our partners as we advocated for the pay plan during the legislative session. My thanks to the campus leaders who were so instrumental in making this happen and communicating the import of our faculty and staff as all of these negotiations were taking place. And now my question, I know you discussed it yesterday in our meeting with the students, but I think it's important for us to have for the record on the minutes the percentage of the tuition increases that went specifically towards these increases, these modest pay increases for our faculty and staff across our campuses. And I was wondering if you could speak to that, Kevin.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Regent McLean, I have gotten good help from Bill MUS in Missoula, Terry Least in Bozeman, and have asked exactly that question. And to put it in context, when the Regents gave us the good directive to strive towards meaningful improvements in compensation, that was at the same meeting where the Regents adjusted tuition rates. The compensation adjustments that are contained in the 20 labor agreements and that at this time are proposed by the Regents in the remaining 5, and then that would also be applied across the board by virtue of your action on this consent agenda. Those adjustments would, for example, the 2 largest campuses in Missoula, those adjustments would spend approximately those adjustments plus some other, not across the board, but raises of other types that are built into collective bargaining agreements and so forth, would spend 73% of the tuition revenue gain generated from the rate adjustment. At Montana State University in Bozeman, the expenditure on faculty and staff raises would use 67% approximately of the revenue generated by the tuition increase.
Thank you.
I want to, Regent Buchanan.
I'm glad, thank you very much, Chairman Robinson. I'm glad Regent McLean asked that question. Kevin, thank you, first of all, for the work you're doing. You're representing this board and what I think were articulated as this board's intentions extremely well, and apparently very effectively with the amount of agreement you've been able to reach. A couple of thoughts on this. I think it's important to note a couple of things. And as we look at the items in front of us, not only related to this, but some of the other items coming up that we'll be voting on today, we are still in unique times. And I think about what a couple members of the audience or of this body have said to me in the past about how for 2 years while the economy was collapsing, I was such a scary voice because I'd give you a market update, which, by the way, is off 370 points today after 280 yesterday. But what I think I was trying to do is reflect some sense of what the rest of the world is perceiving as the status that we're in from an economic perspective. And I understand that we're getting, there are some voices expressing that perhaps we are not doing what we intended to do when we agreed to generate this revenue via tuition increases at the May meeting. And I reject that notion completely. We said it is going to go to help with human capital and human resources on our campuses, and the percentages you just articulate, which are all referring to pay raises, are not only satisfying that, but I know that the rest of the money, and as I articulated yesterday in our meeting with some of the students, I'm concerned it may not be enough to address some of our vacancy issues. So to suggest that because it's not all going to pay raises might not be doing what we intended is something I will not accept, and what I will do is continue to support you with the approach that you're taking in these discussions. And I think I hear the rest of the members of this board saying something similarly. We are talking about public sector in all of these discussions. I'm a business owner, a lot of us are at this table, and the clients and people that I interact with are business owners from the private sector. And a raise in this environment and a stipend in this environment towards health care are things that many of my clients and the people I interact with do not have the luxury to even consider, nonetheless the confidence to apply. So I'm very grateful and am appreciative of the voices from the members of these bargaining units that do express their gratitude. Because again, the circles in which I run, people are grateful to have a job. And we have a luxury that we're able to do what we're doing, and appreciate your stewardship of being extremely prudent while accomplishing a lot as it relates to need as articulated by the bargaining units in which you work with. So thank you. I don't intend to support every item on this agenda today, but I do very much applaud this board for the way that they're working with the newly created resources, and believe that you have unanimous voice behind you that says this is satisfying the intent that was articulated in the May meeting. And thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Regent Buchanan. Are there any of the board that would like to add any of their comments? This is the discussion portion of this, obviously, and I would like to ask if the campus CEOs had any comments that they would like to make at this time. Hearing none. Are there any comments from the public? I'll take that as yes. Okay.
So, am I on? Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to articulate to a thank you for all your work. On making these issues a priority, just to understand how important it is, and as a commitment to the quality and the excellence that we spent so much time at board meetings working on, to realize that obviously the salary compensation component of that is just an enormous challenge. And so to continue to make efforts and progress on that, I think is appreciated. But just also from my position in a faculty member in an English department, where we're constantly trying, as we are in all the departments, to make hires to retain faculty, and we're facing some grim realities there. When all of us are paid 10 to 40% below peers. So we're not talking about the rich places out there, but just averages, the national averages. Those are numbers that should be wake-up calls, I think, to everybody in leadership to figure out how to manage that problem and to move us up. When we look at all the numbers and see we're 50th out of the 50 states in many categories. I mean, those are not places to be proud of, and I know a number of the things you're doing is working towards making progress on that. But I just think it's worth keeping those things in mind in all the decisions you make. Thanks.
Thank you, Marvin.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record, my name is Mark O'Farrell. I'm with MEMFT. I would like to echo Marvin's comments of thanks and to your commitment. Last board meeting, or the board meeting in May in Kalispell, where to a person, each CEO kind of articulated the needs that are at each campus, and you as a board really followed up with that, and we appreciate that from the faculty perspective, from the union perspective. I do have a couple things. I mean, Kevin and his team has done an outstanding job in working with our folks on the ground, our members on the ground that are in those bargaining teams, and Tom Burgess, our field consultant. And so I think we have some work to do. You have the two flagships are not settled yet. And we need to keep that conversation moving, because the flagships are important in the large picture here. You have a first contract at MSU Bozeman that is very close with the tenure track faculty of settling. And just to give you some perspective on first contracts that you may or may not know, the average time that we see around the country to settle or to draft and settle a first contract is 24 to 26 months. So, and you have to keep in mind that contract is really the foundation for contracts on into the future, maybe 40 years into the future. So it's real important that we're cognizant of that, and we take the time to really do a good job on that. You're at 18 months, so we're well below the average on that, and we're getting very close. And that's a testament to the hard work that your team and our teams are doing on that. We need to continue that conversation at Missoula. I think we have some things to straighten out there, and we're getting close. So we just keep moving forward. The problems that we have are, I'd be remiss if I didn't address some of them, and they're a result of our legislature. There's shortfalls that came out of the legislature. The pay plan, not being the least of which, the demise of the pay plan really puts a pinch on you as a board and us as a union in terms of having the tools to bargain with. I think we need to be vigilant, folks. I mean, we need to talk to candidates, potential candidates, and get them on the record about public education, higher ed. Ask them the hard questions. Will they support us? We talk a lot about, preparing the next legislature. I would like to say we need to start that preparation before the election, because those are the folks that are going to be making the decisions. And so ask the tough questions and get them on the record. We need to have education-friendly legislators, or else we're going to be back facing this problem over and over and over again without the tools to make any movement forward. Marvin talks about 40%. So we need to do that. Just to comment, Regent Buchanan, I understand that the whole private sector thing. I am now in the private sector, and working in the job that I'm at, and we are bargaining with our employer. And so it's difficult, but there's something to keep in mind. And in the public sector, especially MUS and public employees in Montana, we get one bite of the apple every 2 years. And so in the private sector, as things turn around, perhaps quickly or not, the private sector can react much more quickly. So that's why the decisions that you're making to give these modest increases now are so important, because we don't get another chance until the next legislature meets. So I commend you and thank you for your willingness to step out there and make those commitments, and thank Kevin and his team for the work that you've done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Jennifer Gursky, and I am the MAS president, which is the Montana Associated Students. I appreciate the conversation that has been brought up today before the board, and I appreciate the openness and communication between the board and students, and some of those comments from yesterday's conversations trickling out into really the public sphere. I think as a student, I I think some of those objectives and those percentages are going to be what we're looking for. As a person who worked the legislature and is now, again, representing as an elected official students, it's going to be important that we realize that the sacrifice that students have made in knowing where that fund is coming is really meeting those objectives. And I think that this board is strenuously working towards that, and I appreciate that. I would also like to put on the record, though, that yesterday's conversation between Mr. MUS and Mr. Trevor and today's conversation about tuition and benefits for staff and faculty cannot be mutually exclusive. I would like to echo Marco's words with, we need to rally around our policymakers, and we need to design a strategy that values higher education, not just accessibility in the financial realm, but accessibility in the quality realm. And so when we're talking about vacancy savings, we're talking about quality. And today, I guess as the president of the students of Montana, I appreciate this board taking very seriously the students' concerns from last May. And I think that we're on the right track, and I look forward to the progress that we make. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Are there any other comments?
Chairman Robertson, members of the committee, members of the board. I'm Kevin Thane with Montana State University. Excuse me. I'm chair of Staff Senate at the university, representing all of the classified employees, both union and non-union at the university. I think it really needs to be said that we're at the point at which we are with the settlement of the 25 contracts, primarily because of the fortitude of this board, and that needs to be said. Kevin McCrae commented on the fact that this is an historic moment in the 40 years of bargaining relative to the fact that the higher education system did not simply follow the pay plan. You had the, again, fortitude to make the break and recognize the fact that the faculty and staff of the university system needed to be recognized and taken care of. One small fact that I'd like to bring up relative to Regent McLean's question on what percentage of the tuition increase went toward providing these raisins. I think that hides the fact that the work of the faculty and staff, the workload greatly increased because of the, again, historic enrollment increases that we've seen over the past couple of years. And so the percentage of the increase in tuition that went toward the raises certainly needs to be tempered by looking at the number of students that additionally we're dealing with as faculty and staff. But again, want to compliment the board for taking the direction that you have. Regent Barrett sat at the meeting when tuition increases were discussed, and I believe his words were, "We will not turn our backs on our employees," and you haven't, and it's appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thane. Are there any other comments during this point? Seeing none, what I'd like to do, Mr. Chair, I know we have one other agenda item under discussion, and I also know that you spoke a little bit about that yesterday, but I'd like to take just a few minutes to see if we have any other individuals that didn't have a chance to speak about the item B, which is the status of the commissioner search. Okay. So at this point, I'd like to open up discussion on item B, the commissioner's search. And what I'd like to do first is see if there's any of the board here that would like to further comment on that. I know that we've had our discussions a bit, but I'd like to open that up.
I mean, I don't have anything yet. Is there anything more to add to the updates you gave us before? I mean, I feel we know where we are.
I think that's all we have in terms of the update. If we set some time out, I guess, to just if we've tried to allow, and we will continue to allow some public comment on this. If anybody has any comments to add to the record about the search or the process or even the position that we're trying to fill, we could certainly do that. But there will be other forums too.
Mr. Chairman, I will say that Lynn isn't here, but Angela was part of one of the sessions listening sessions where I leave in a community. In that case, it was at Butte. Got to visit about that, and we are compiling those notes, but I don't know if there was any overarching theme since I wasn't in the room. I know we had note takers, members of the board, and they're pulling those together for you, but you were in the room, I wasn't, if there was some big impression that you were getting.
Sure. Thank you.
To help the
Thank you,
board.
Dr. Stearns. I think there were a couple of themes I think that resonated real clearly from the meeting with the folks that attended at Tech. And I think the first one is to keep the public apprised, even outside of these meetings, outside of our listening sessions, of just exactly what progress we are making. Perhaps on the web, provide an opportunity for folks to provide feedback about that process and what that looks like. As we narrow our candidates down, perhaps provide an opportunity for folks to weigh in on that as well. Additionally, from that conversation, one of the items that came from that conversation was we want a person who can communicate a sense of participation from all of the campuses, recognizing that we are distanced in the number of decades now from the restructuring, but keeping in mind the importance of communication with all of the campuses across the state. And I think that those were kind of the two main themes that resonated from the Tech conversation. So if we can keep people apprised and perhaps involved in the process as we move forward, and then secondly, convey a sense of participation by all the campuses in a meaningful way, that is something that we want to be characteristic, the ability of that to be characteristic in our new commissioner. So those were the two themes that resonated.
Thank you, Regent McLean. I'd also like to add that I did attend the commissioners' listening sessions at Dawson Community College and Miles Community College, and it was discussed there about the commissioner's search. One particular board member at Dawson had mentioned that he appreciated that the board was doing a national search, that he felt that it's important to look far and wide and to consider all of the candidates out there because the position is so critical. And at the same time, knowing that there are good candidates to consider here in Montana as well, but that he appreciated that we were going through the effort, strenuous effort of looking nationally for candidates as well.
And that is exactly what's mapped out. The plan as it stands, I mentioned some yesterday, but it's from these listening sessions and from conversations with board members. We should hopefully by the end of October create a prospectus that we'll use then to guide publication of the position and recruit for that position. And obviously one of the functions of the search firm is to actively recruit from all sources across the country, and we'll advertise and publicize this position on a national level and on a state level and even on an internal level to what extent there's people interested, and certainly try to find the best person we can.
If we have no other comments, then we're going to go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. So we have before us the items for consent. And I'd like to ask, first of all, do we need a motion on this to move it forward?
Referenced by Kevin McRae.
Great, okay. Thank you, Regent McLean, yeah, item T will be not considered in this because that is still under discussion. Is that?
Yeah, I think, do we want to do this committee as a whole? I mean, if, we could certainly do that. Then I think we will, Regent Buchanan.
Great. If we're going to move forward with this, then I would request that we separate items A through I as one block and J through O. And I'd like to explain why. Again, I'm learning a lot about being a board member, and I appreciate my fellow board members and your patience with that learning process. We walked out of the discussion about where we were headed with the revenue that was being generated, and the message was very loud and clear to me that the needs are in the classroom. And I intend to follow through with the board's intent, although I was late coming to that position. And so to me, I see two very big differences in those items, and consider the discussion around them to be very different. So if you would so indulge me, Regent Robinson, to separate items A through I as one block and J through O. Thank you.
Thank
So
you,
maybe
Regent Buchanan.
Yeah, maybe we could go ahead and amend the motion then, if Regent McLean, if you're willing to, we'll move the approval of A through I. Okay, so we have a,
Great. And so in discussing items A through I in this motion, does anyone see any of these items that need to be removed? Seeing none. The motion that's been made, I'd like to take a vote. See all those who are in favor, say aye.
let's, if we're going to actually vote, we need to make sure we have another opportunity for public comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. At this point, I'd also like to ask if the campus leaders have any comments at all on these items. Any public comment? Okay, thank you. Seeing then, I'd like to ask for a vote on these items A through I. All those in favor say aye.
I guess, I don't know how this discussion thing went. I guess I am curious. I'd like to understand. I'm taking it, your suggestion is you're going to support these. I guess I wanted to hear the reasons.
Or is your discussion on J through O?
No, very fair, and it relates to these.
I thought it
The
did.
case that has been made to us very loudly is that our employees on the ground at the campuses support staff, classified staff, professional staff, and faculty. The need has merited the approval of this board to go generate new revenue related to tuition. As I have articulated before, the large bulk of it is being used for pay raises, which I'm going to go with this board and support in the labor agreements. That's the intent of this board. I am very concerned that we don't have enough revenue to help fill those vacancies that we've been creating for 6 years due to budget cuts. And if we're going to have money to do some of these things, I want to use as much money as we can to do that. And the items A through I are raises associated with administrative positions. And I feel that money would be more appropriately used, helping fill spots that have been empty in registrar's office, admission offices, in places where our students interact with quite directly. And so I, again, if you see the two uses of the items J through O are recognizing and supporting our very best faculty members. And that's where I believe the need was articulated that compelled this board to increase tuition, and feel that I will very comfortably support those items, but do not feel comfortable supporting the first set of items. Regent Barrett, I hope that satisfies your
Yeah,
curiosity.
I understand. I've looked through all those items, and true, the bulk of them deal with administrative people, but some are faculty salaries too. They're not just administration. So they are the faculty too.
The way I understand it, and you're right, Regent Barrett, Chairman Robinson, for the large part, they're administrative responsibilities, and as I look at the numbers that they have, they're not limited to, but have some administrative responsibilities to be itemized on these staff agendas. But as importantly, the numbers of the raises are not consistent with what we've done or approved with our labor partners. And again, feel, the overriding concern for me, Regent Barrett, is the $3 million or so that is left after we approve all these pay raises is not enough to fix some of the holes in the areas on campuses that we have heard articulated very emotionally and very directly in the last couple of years as we've dealt with vacancy savings issues.
I'd also like to see if Kevin McCrae could offer any further insight to that.
Regent Robinson, just a point of clarification that the faculty items that would be included in A through I are tenure actions. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Okay. All right, at this point, then, we have items A through I, and I'd like to ask the board for a vote. All those that are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Aye. Okay. Thank you. Now we have, I'd like to, I guess we need a second motion for the remaining items which you have included. Now, let me clarify this first, though, with Regent Buchanan. You've included A through I, but separated J through O on this. Correct? Yes, that's fine with us. So if we'd like to have a motion on those items J through O.
So moved.
Are there any other comments? See none, then I'd like to, these are items J through O. I'd like to ask for a vote from the board. All those in favor of moving these forward, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? All right, motion carries. So it certainly sounds like then we have remaining items under the labor agreements that we need to also move forward, and I'd like to ask for a motion on that.
Move items A through U, accepting item T.
All right. Motion heard. Yes.
T like in Tom.
All right, so I'd like to ask if there's any comments regarding this motion. Ms. Regent Buchanan?
Might I extend the same curiosity to Regent Barrett? Why are we pulling out item T?
Kevin said he wasn't finished with that one,
Oh, perfect.
and so we can't approve it because it's not yet.
I missed that. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I would just comment that, I mean, we've discussed it here, the update was appropriate, but any ratification of these certainly doesn't signify our end or willingness to continue to bargain in good faith with the other units that aren't part of this. And whatever we do here today doesn't close the door on those conversations. We'll approach them as we have from the get-go in good faith and in good bargaining practice. And I know it's important to members out there. I've received an email today that just reminds us, which is very appropriate, we still have some contracts to go, and we've given Kevin some direction, but that's all it is. And we'll ask him to show up at those tables and bargain at the table and see if we can't solve the other 5.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Those comments are very appreciated, so thank you. So with that in mind, do we still need to ask for the campus CEOs regarding this motion? Is there any other comments regarding this? Nope. Any comments from the public? Don't see none. And I'd like to ask for a vote on items A through U with the exception of T. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. I think that concludes our committee business, so I'd like to turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Regent Robinson. Get back to my homepage here. I think that then will take that committee off the remainder of our agenda, which was first item up on our discussion and action of the following items. So we can, with that, move straight to the academic research and student affairs and take action on those items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. We have earlier had great discussion on all of these items. First, regarding the consent items A through D, would certainly it was the consensus of the two-person committee to move forward items A through D. At this time, I'd like to request if there's any interest to separate any of the items from any of the members of the board for further discussion. Seeing none, before we move to a vote, any comments or thoughts related to these items from campus leaders, members of the body? Any public comment as it relates to the consent items? Seeing none, as a committee, we've moved forward for a vote, items A through D in the consent item. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? They pass, thank you. Action items, I don't think we have, let's move them, it was the sense of the committee to move them forward as a package. Items A through C. Any members of the board wish to separate? Mr. Regent Barrett? Great, would you turn on your microphone?
Excuse
Separated
me.
item B, please.
B, but I want to just make a brief comment, but I intend to support it.
Sounds just great at this moment. Then we'd open up for discussion, item B.
I simply want to say, it was clear from our discussions that we had, it's a university, maybe this is what we call a teaching moment. And I think it's only a matter that it makes us look to our process. And again, this is a wonderful result for the state of Montana. So there's not one question about that. Probably had the board been engaged earlier, we would have had a discussion about how we might want to posture this for the state. Result may not have been any different. Doesn't matter. So we've all learned a lesson, but let's move forward. And I just want to make that comment that it makes us look to how we handle our processes in the future. But it's a tremendous result for the state of Montana.
Thank you, Regent Barrett.
Having said that, you can put them as a lump now.
Any other comments or thoughts? Chairman Christian?
I'll move the approval of item A through C.
Any discussion on these items from members of the board? Any discussion from campus CEOs? Members of the body? Any public comment as it relates to action items A through C? Seeing none, then we'd move forward with a vote. All in favor of moving forward items A through C, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Items pass. Seeing that, Mr. Chairman, we had a lengthy discussion, and I would like to extend an apology to the members of the board for the overtime that we used in yesterday's discussion. I think there was some great discussion, and as a note, we will follow up with Chancellor Blackadder regarding carrying on the discussion item H between now and the next meeting, and thank everybody for their hard work, and in particular Deputy Commissioner Moore. Thank you. With that, we're done. Thanks, Chairman Christian.
Thank you, Regent Buchanan. The next item up on the agenda is the action items and consent for administrative budget and oversight. Regent McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have before us the consent agenda items A through J. Are there any board members who would like to separate any out? Okay, then do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none then. Okay, then we'll take a vote. All in favor of the consent agenda items A through J, approving them, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, now on to action item A, construction of the new residence hall and the renovation of the existing halls and bond issue for the projects at MSU Bozeman. Item A, do I have, is there any public comment on this? Any comment from folks at MSU at all? Okay then. Is there a motion in favor of this? Thank you, Regent Barrett. All in favor of action item A, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now on to item B, authorization of the COT street resurfacing at MSU Billings. Is there anything from the campus perspective? Any public comment in this regard? Okay, seeing none, then I'll look for a motion from a member of the board. Okay, thank you. All in favor of this action item, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. On to item C, to renovate the IT metals and authorization to include reverted appropriation and funding at UM Western. Is there any public comment on this? Any comment from the campus? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to move this forward? Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Now we're on to item E, the operating budgets for the Montana University system. Oh, D. What? Oh, I skipped D. My apologies. My apologies. The off-campus lease for extension housing program facility at MSU Bozeman. My apologies. Is there any public comment? Anything specific from the campus? Okay, then is there a motion? Thank you. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Thank you. Now we are on to item E, the operating budgets. For this, I would just look to the campuses for any final words on this. And I would extend a great deal of appreciation to our campus leaders and their financial officers for the great work that they do. And I look forward to communication and continued efforts with you as we go forward. Any public comment? Okay, then is there a motion?
I'll move the approval of item E, and I would just make a comment. I appreciate the effort that is put forth. Obviously, our operating budgets is one of the biggest items over the course of a year that falls under the governance portion of this board. We've messed around with these, how we present this over the years, and we've changed it considerably even in my time on the board, and I still don't know if we have it exactly right, and we can revisit that. But the work is substantial that goes into it, the effort's substantial, and the responsibility of us is the same. I think we got it right, and it's always sort of a proud moment for me when we move our budgets forward, because it's a big piece of what we do. So I thank everyone for the effort that has went into it, and I would move the approval.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Commissioner.
Thank you. I would like just to, I realized I should have given a compliment yesterday to the fiscal staff, as you just did to from all the campuses, but also then it comes in, and starting about the 1st of August in our office, especially Frida Hauser starts pulling all those together in ways that the board really, frankly, just almost on bended knee begged for, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. Please, they said, we know it'll take extra work, but get all of those in similar formats so that we can compare them more easily. And they also added very appropriate requests for metrics that were comparable from campus to campus. For most of that now, I think that a lot of the campus officers certainly help with that, but Frida's the one that, for the most part, through August, gives up a lot of time to get that into the kind of format that we now, frankly, can approve them much more quickly than we used to, because it's easier to look at those metrics and compare them campus to campus than we used to be able to do so. And I failed to compliment her yesterday. Mick probably did, but thank you, fiscal staff.
Thank you. Just to keep Kathy Swift's hair intact, I'll go ahead and administer the vote on this. We have before us a motion to approve our fiscal year 12 MSU operating budgets. Is there any further administrator comment? Campus or students? Is there any further public comment on the motion? Further public comment? All those then in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I believe that concludes our budget committee. Thank you, Regent McLean. The two-year committee, Regent Barrett.
Mr. Chair, I managed to organize things so we have nothing to vote on.
You have nothing to vote on. That's exactly right.
Except for seeing if there's any public comment for any items in this area. Seeing none, I turn it back to you, sir.
Thank you. Members of the board, any further comments? Okay, then we will call one last time for public comment on any items not on today's agenda. Mr. Farrell, could you straighten your name tag, please?
Mr. Chairman, my wife thanks you.
You're going to be on TV, you know.
My father always said you represent the family when you go out and do these things. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just a quick reminder, you should have all gotten an invitation in the mail from the Montana Professional Teaching Foundation about the upcoming Montana Educator Forum. And if you didn't, I brought some extra brochures, but I do have to say something here that, you know, kind of pains me as a person that has 2 degrees from the Montana State University Bozeman. I have to make a compliment to the Grizzlies here and President Engstrom. That Bobby Evans, Dean Bobby Evans, was on our planning committee, and she is sending a busload of pre-service teachers. She's put together a group with her faculty there of 30-plus pre-service teachers that are in the education department. And for the first time ever, we're going to have pre-service folks at the Educator Forum. So it'll be really a great opportunity for them to come down, along with some faculty members. But I'd like to invite you to come. There's a panel of 4 folks, 4 different panels that are going to be talking about some things that are happening in education, and one of them is the partnership between higher ed and K-12 and a new model of student teaching, a co-teaching model. So there'll be a presentation by those folks. There's some labor management presentation with the Helena Public Schools and the Helena Education Association. It has really a model contract that's a model alternative pay system for the entire country. And so, along with some other things. So I'm going to leave some brochures if it's okay with you. And that is next Friday in Helena. From 9 to 3 in the afternoon at the Colonial Inn. So if you want to pass these around, we'd love to have your presence there. And congratulations, President Engstrom, and President Cruzado will chat a little later.
Let me know where's the boss for MSU.
Is there any further public comment?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Commissioner
President
Stearns, I just would like to introduce our new Vice President of Instruction and Student Services, who I wasn't able to do so earlier, but we're very pleased to welcome Dr. Kristen Jones to FECC. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Did I miss announcements?
Kevin Nelson from Billings, that's Nelson, and these are from the comments from the slide presentation yesterday afternoon. When I was sitting here, the phone rings, and of course I didn't answer it, and I get out of the meeting, and he calls and he says, "Why didn't you answer my phone?" I said, "Well, I was in a meeting." He said, "Well, what meeting?" Board of Regents. He says, "Oh my goodness." He goes, and we got talking about the cost of education and the cost of the tuition where these kids are borrowing this money, and you know, down on the street, his first comment was, "Oh, it's got to be them damn books. That's what causing my kids so much costs." Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what's on the street. And it seems like with the technology we have today that we have e-books and we have all these other venues where these kids could probably not incur all these hard costs for these books. And I don't know if that's a true statement or not, but that's what's on the street. And so I'm wondering, are you willing to look into those avenues to see that, you know, you've got all of these e-readers and kibbies and all of this stuff that could really reduce the cost of some of these students. The second point is the financing. This is what caught my eye, was this shift, or this escalated line of costs that these students are incurring. My son just graduated. His comment was, "Damn, I didn't realize I borrowed that much money." There's no accountability. My wife could not even call up to the finance department of this university to find out what his financial status was, because they said it's not any of your business. These kids, it's kids in a candy store mentality. Commissioner Stearns, you said it was anecdotal, but it isn't. It's, hey, I'm going to Cancun because I can. And somehow we've got to get the parents, I mean, you've got these kids, they're up here and it's keep up with the Joneses and there's free money and it's evident that they're borrowing it because it's evident on the chart. And so somehow we have to break through this privacy thing and get the parents back involved in the financing of their students and making sure that they're accountable and making sure that the students are not, because we don't know, as a parent, we're giving them money thinking, oh, they're using it for this, and they could be down at the student finance office getting all kinds of loans that we don't even know they're occurring, and they don't even know this is happening. And at the end of the year, it's like, where did you get all this loans at? Well, we got them down here. And so I'm just curious. Maybe there's answers, maybe there's not. But this is what we found, is that we had no ability to know, and we weren't given the information that what our son was incurring as cost, because the finance department said it's not any of your business. And I think it is my business, but that's a little bit of an issue, and I would hope that this board would maybe look into that and to see how we can get a better relationship between the student and the parent and some of these financial monies that's getting spent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. We don't often respond to public comment because, after all, it is comment, but the book thing has been something that's been a tremendous amount of attention from the board over the last few years. President Engstrom, do you want to enlighten all?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to make sure everyone knows that that is an active area of discussion on our campuses. Our bookstore manager has been very involved in that discussion, not just locally, but even on a national level. So the idea of electronic books and having students purchase essentially the intellectual content, intellectual property, as opposed to a physical book, is something that is being pursued pretty actively. We have 2 or 3 test cases going on, I guess you would say, on our campus right now. So it's an area I think everyone realizes we are moving toward, but we're not there yet. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that it was an active area of investigation. Thanks.
Certainly. Mrs. Gursky.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I just wanted to take a few moments to respond as a student and as a representative of students, and it will be very brief, knowing that we all have places to go. It might behoove the board to actually do a study as to where students spend their money, and might we cease the conversation of anecdotal evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment?
Hi, Grace Horman, student at MSUB. I would also like to respond to that comment. The question of books and book prices is really a question that comes later in your educational career, I guess you could say. The earlier classes are much easier to finance because the books are much easier to find. They're much more in demand. However, the farther you get in your education, it's harder to find books, it's hard to find e-copies of books, and all of that kind of thing. I've personally worked in this campus bookstore, and I've rung up nursing students who spend $1,200 on books for one semester. And these are students in their maybe last semester or close to last semester who can't find e-book copies, who can't find copies for rent, who maybe need a new edition for whatever reason. And I think what really needs to be addressed is the books in the later classes rather than perhaps the earlier books. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Any further public comment on any items not on our agenda or on our agenda for that matter? All right, then I believe we're ready to adjourn. Dr. Grosset, thank you once again for hosting this meeting, and to all your group that has put on all that they've done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're welcome back anytime, and we'll try and have a little less pomp and circumstance next time.
Thank you. All right, meeting is adjourned.